and then you can take it away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Newt Tedder. I'm the Stormwater Permit Writer at EPA. I've been to a couple of your meetings before, so thanks again for inviting me to this one. I'm just going to give a quick rundown of some year 3 inter-report stuff that we've been looking at. We're just finishing up our review of all of the year 3 inter-reports that came in, and then just highlight some things to maybe continue to look at, and highlight some things we're working on for year 4, like sort of where we're headed for this year. Some highlights from the year 3 inter-reports were, one, we continue to have over 90% of the reports coming in on time, which is huge. It is a part of permit compliance to get that permit on time, so it's really good to see that people are getting a jump on it and getting that permit in a report in on time. The other thing that was a real big winner this year, as building on the last year's work, is IDDE. So there was a lot of work done to remove illicits again this year. I think there was over 50 additional ones found throughout the state. So we're up to multiple hundreds of illicits removed across the state since 2016 or 2018 when the permit went into effect. So everybody out there, you should be really happy about that. You're doing a lot of good work removing these illicit connections. It's a big part of the permit requirements. It's also a really big win for our water bodies to get that sewage out. So it's a big environmental win for this permit, and particularly for all of you that are implementing it. Some things that sort of fell off this year, I think, were related to construction and post-construction. So year 3 was getting that post-construction ordinance or regulations updated to be consistent with the permit. And we're hovering a little over around 60% of the respondents said they actually were able to do that this year. That's really low and not great. So we're going to be trying to dig into more of the compliance on that end, as well as kind of looking at those people that said they did it to make sure they actually updated the ordinance with the removal requirements for sediment and phosphorus into their ordinances for new and redevelopment. And also construction sites. So there was only about half of everybody said they were actually collecting as-built drawings and doing inspections of construction sites. And that's a requirement every year now moving forward. So, I mean, that should be happening. And so we're kind of wondering why that's not happening. So there might be some outreach or some other mechanism to try to look at what's going on there. So moving ahead from those two big major pieces that we kind of want to focus on, and I would just throw it out there, if you did say you updated your ordinance, make sure or regulatory, regulations, make sure you go back and just make sure you got those pollution reduction targets in there. If you didn't, you're going to need to redo it and make sure you got that in there. I know you guys have done a lot of work in the watershed to try to come up with really good templates, so I'm not too worried about you guys down there. But I think just one thing to be aware of. So as we move into year 4, we're moving out of the sampling. So all the sampling is now done on, should be done on everybody's outfalls, new priority rankings, and we're moving into the catchment investigation portion of IDDE. It's a lot of work. It's where everybody will spend the next 7 years of permit compliance, really digging into their system, including a lot of mapping of, every catch basin, every pipe, catchment areas, what's draining to each catch basin, and popping manholes and finding illicits. So that work will continue, be ongoing, and there'll be a big focus for the next multiple years. Only about 22% of people said they've started the catchment investigations across the state. So that's fine. You didn't have to start by now. So I like to see that people have started, but it's, this is the year to really get that going, because there's a lot of work to do over the next 6 to 7 years. The next biggest piece is going to be, again, revisiting those post-construction standards to make sure you've got the pollution targets in there if you didn't already. And you need to begin looking at the barriers to green infrastructure and low impact design in regulations. So this is looking at either completing checklists, of looking for those barriers and then putting in plans to actually remove those barriers to green infrastructure and low impact development within your code. And that's really to make sure that the new standards you have for pollution reduction can actually be implemented by the developers coming in. And the next big piece is also part of that is, making sure you are reviewing the like as-built plans and the final plans for all of these developments to make sure they're actually meeting the pollution targets in the permit and now in your regulations. So it's one thing to have them in there, but the other thing is you need to enforce your program as part of the permit. So make sure we're enforcing a program to make sure you're actually getting those pollution targets met by the development community as they're doing redevelopments and new developments in all of your towns. Those are going to be our big focuses for year 4. Right? Just continue on with your IDDE, moving on to the next phase, and construction, post-construction standards will continue to be a focus for us moving forward. Just because really those 2 areas are where we're going to get our biggest decreases in pollution going into all of the rivers and streams across Massachusetts. So over time, we need to have those regulations and ordinances in place to really make some progress here. So that's going to be our focus, at least for reviews, and it should be your focus moving forward to make sure you've got all that in place for a successful program for your development that's going to happen in your community. I think that's it for me, Carrie. I'm going to stop talking, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I know there's always questions that come up from either the watershed groups or from you guys or from all the coalitions. I enjoy just being on here to answer questions. So feel free to grill me at this point if you'd like.
Thank you. Now for everybody who is in the meeting here, I can't see you all on screen. So if you have a question, could you go to the reactions button and click the raise hand, and then you'll pop up. I know people have questions. Don't be shy.
I'm okay to get off easy too. It's totally fine.
I can ask a question to get us started. I'm curious, Newt. So you said that across the state there were a number of communities that didn't have their bylaws in place in time, or the bylaws weren't quite right. Is that something that EPA is going to be taking enforcement action on, just trying to do more education around? Sort of what's your strategy to respond to that for towns who find themselves in that situation for various reasons?
We're not really sure right now, right? I think it could be a mix of potential responses, because like I'm not in the enforcement office, so I don't know what they're going to do. We're just kind of digesting all the information right now and how to best address the situation. It seems to be pretty widespread, which is not a good thing of non-compliance. So we're trying to figure out, what is the best strategy to get everybody back into compliance here. Is it just an education thing, or not knowing, or just, or was it like a purposeful thing that people just weren't paying attention and just didn't do it, or didn't feel like they needed to do it? And I know, and I hope it's not the latter. So I don't know what our response is going to be, just because they don't sit in that enforcement office, but I know there's going to be at least some outreach that happens, especially to all those towns that, said they did not do this year. So there'll at least be some outreach to them as to trying to figure out why and alert them to the fact that it is, an actual permit requirement. It's not like an optional thing, it was due last year. So everybody that has not done it just remains out of compliance with the permit until it's done, which is could be a very large deal if there was an enforcement action or an audit per se. But our main focus, I think, will be trying to get everybody back into compliance as quickly as we possibly can. And so whatever strategy does that is what we'll be choosing, I think.
Do other folks have questions? And I would say my impression, Newt, is that usually in forums like this, you're happy to field any questions, and you're not particularly paying any attention to who's asking the question. So you've sort of got your education hat on as opposed to your enforcement hat, if anybody's worried about that. I've got another question, if nobody else wants to jump in, which is we're about 3.5 years into a 5-year permit, and I'm just curious. The last permit took a while for EPA to get it issued after the previous permit had expired, and I'm just curious what EPA is thinking in terms of the renewal of this permit, in terms of a timeline, and if there may be some new wrinkles in the next iteration of the permit, or if it'll mostly just be a continuation of the current concept.
So we do plan to reissue it before the 10 years, like the last one. We do have an actual stormwater section now at EPA, and it's very, very small right now, but it is bigger than it was in 2008, which was 0 people. So it is bigger, and so we do have it more on the radar as something, and we have an actual program. You see me a lot more, than there was no me. For a while it was Thelma Murphy doing the permits, but she would only do it every 5 years or so. So we do plan to issue it, definitely not on time. So this permit expires in it expires this year. So it ends up being like a 4-year permit from 2018 because we delayed it for a year. We didn't extend the expiration date. So it will expire. Everybody will receive a letter saying that their permit coverage is continued until we reissue the permit, and you have to reapply for the next permit. That will happen automatically. There is nothing that any city or town needs to do for that. You can expect about a 1-year gap. So we're going to basically make it a 5-year permit by extending the permit coverage administratively for everybody for a year. And so you can look for a draft of the permit sometime in 2023. So it's going to be expired for about a year, but it doesn't really affect anybody. There's all the permit timelines in there are 5 years or greater. It doesn't force the increase of any timeline or anything like that. It's just keep plugging away, moving year to year. You're going to see a gap. You're going to get a letter from us saying it's been administratively continued, but just keep moving. And we will try in 2023 to release the next draft of the next permit. As far as what's going to be new, I'm not really sure. I haven't started drafting it yet, so I don't know which pieces we're going to really try to push on. I mean, you can see the IDDE program was already laid out for 10 years and the mapping requirements in that section. So that's going to continue. We're not going to force everybody to now speed up their program there. It's just going to, there's a lot of things in the program that will just be continuations of the progress we've made. But each iteration of the MS4 permit needs to be a little more stringent than the last. So there will be some pieces that we'll probably push on. I'm probably thinking it's going to be mostly centered around impaired waters. I think this permit had some stuff for impaired waters in there to start the program. Everybody in the Neponset River watershed knows that, right? You have to do these nutrient source identification reports this year. And so, those reports are envisioned to sit on the shelf. So they will be used in the next permit term to inform different actions that you're going to be required to take to begin reducing the pollutant of concern to those impaired water bodies. So I think that's sort of logically where the permits is beginning to head is, once we've got really good stormwater management programs, once we know our systems, our IDDE is sort of winding down, where do you begin to focus next? And I think that logically is impaired waterways and trying to really focus on trying to get some of our waterways really cleaned up after we got a handle on how all of our systems are actually working.
Any other questions? And don't worry about raising your hand, just unmute yourself. Mike Trotta.
Yeah, I'm interested in the BMP requirements, Newton. What do you expect in that? BMPs, are we talking rain gardens, updating detention areas, those kinds of things? Those are due shortly, I believe.
Mike, are you talking about the impaired waters requirements for Neponset? Like, so like there's a requirement to, identify different BMPs you could do and then do at least one. Is that what you're referring
Yes.
to? Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's really open-ended, right? So that the requirement is to try to get a handle on, hotspots in your town and figure out where you already have BMPs, and then try to at least come up with a list of things you could possibly do and try to do at least one. You have to do at least one by year 6, I think. So you can choose, it's not.
You're confusing me now on when is year 6?
So year 6 is from the effective date of the permit. So effective date of permit is 2018. So you've got till 2020.
2024?
2024 to do that.
All right.
And you get to choose what you would do. And we kind of assumed you'd come up with a laundry list of things that you could possibly do, and you may have something that's coming up for redevelopment in town. You might be ripping something up already that maybe you want to retrofit, and that would be a logical place for you to do it. We're not saying, ideally you would focus on the place where you're going to get the most pollution out. But let's say you already have something, a capital project planned that you can actually build in some of these green infrastructure projects. That would be totally fine. So we didn't want to limit you on what you had to do and where you had to do it, just based on how municipal budgets work. Like you may have something you already know that you can easily do, because you're going to be ripping something up, and that's where you should do it. Throw it in where you can.
And when we do these things, Newton, when we do the annual report, we're just reporting that we did this. You're not looking for plans, as-built, calculations or anything like that.
We're going to be looking for you to say how much pollution you're getting out with that project. So we have the different pollution removal tools on our website. You put in basically the design storage volume of the thing you've created, right? And and the land area draining to it. So basically the size of your BMP, the type of your BMP, and the air and the amount of volume of water draining to that BMP will allow you to calculate what, how much sediment, phosphorus, nitrogen, metals you're removing from that BMP on an annual basis. And that's what we're asking you to report on. So we will be asking you to report something back to us. So you're going to need to know some information about that BMP, but we figure you're going to know that anyway. But so we're not going to review the as-built, but we're going to be asking you for information that you're going to need to get off of it.
All right, very good.
Can I follow up, because I had some of these same questions Mike was raising. Can you just talk a little bit more about, because the stuff about BMPs is sort of tucked in some different sections, and there's some stuff that's due at the end of year 4 and some stuff at the end of year 5, and then the demonstration project in year 6. Could you just talk a little bit about what is being expected year 4 versus year 5, and sort of how those things are different? Like, my impression is year 4 is maybe just like identify some possible spots, and year 5 is more of like, yeah, I've actually looked at these spots and thought of whether it's actually reasonable to do something here, and I've got something that starts to rise to the level of being more of an actual plan. Is that kind of as simple as it is?
That's pretty much as simple as it is, right? I mean, you're really focused on basically like hotspot mapping for year 4, your nutrient source identification reports, looking at those areas of town. Then you're gonna that have the I guess loadings, and then from there you would start to develop a list of potential projects in those areas. Do you own a municipal parking lot in those areas, for instance, that you could potentially put on a list for updating and retrofitting? And then from there, after you've chosen a couple of places, and you're going to really start to bring those into the design phase. And then by year 6, you need to have had installed one of them. So that's the idea.
And one question on the year 6, that I mean, the year 6 retrofit doesn't have to be done in year 6. Am I right? Like if, Canton rebuilt a school and they upgraded the stormwater in year 4, that satisfies their year 6 requirement?
That's
Not-
that would
not-
satisfy.
But don't tell Mike that, because we want to build a new one every year, but
Yeah, I'd like you to build a new one every year too. So, but yes, if you've done one in the past, it could be any time during the permit term. You just need to make sure you have the correct information, which I'm sure you do, bring it to the design phase to calculate the pollution reduction from the BMP is going to be.
and my one last question about this, am I right in remembering that there is sort of is there a generalized requirement to start sort of tracking pollution reduction whenever you do an upgrade? I mean, I know for the TMDL communities, you know, it's like just the nature of the TMDL almost compels you to track every upgrade, whether it's private or public or whatever, just so you're kind of accumulating your points. But for the non-TMDL communities, is there an actual requirement to start tracking for any actual retrofit that happens on town property?
Yes, so that's part of the Impaired Waters requirements, that you begin tracking the reductions you're getting from all of the BMPs that you put in, all the retrofits that go in. So that's starting after you do this source identification report, I believe. I might be getting the date wrong there, and I apologize if I am, but you do need to begin tracking that. So the idea is, you know, when you put these in, you're going to start to come up with a list of where they are, when they were maintained, you know, and the pollution reduction you're getting out of them, just to make sure you continue to know and continue with the upkeep of them. But we also want to know that pollution reduction piece, and it's going to be important moving forward for all impaired waters communities to begin tracking that information, right? Because if we're going to be moving into another permit term with maybe ramped up impaired waters requirements, that information is going to be vital to help with compliance. Where these things are, the maintenance of all those BMPs, the pollution reduction you're getting from them are all going to be very crucial pieces of information. So that sooner you start tracking that information, the better. Both, I mean, if you want to really set yourself up for success, you'd be tracking everything that's installed, not only by municipal property, but what are the pollution reductions you're getting from private development now. We have the requirements for phosphorus and sediment removal in the post-construction standards. There's a requirement that you implement that program, so you need to be checking on those developers. But part of that check needs to be, or should be, collecting the information where you can start to identify the pollution reductions you're getting from the development that's taking place, that you can take credit for potentially in a next permit term. So really tracking that information and accounting for that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Martin?
Yeah, so I think this discussion of the BMPs and identifying them is a good time to remind folks that a couple of years ago, just in the immediate pre-COVID days, NEPA and MAPC collaborated to develop a GIS-based screening tool to help identify potentially favorable sites for just recharge and other kinds of BMPs. So I'm not sure if it got lost in the scuffle since COVID, because I think we released that just in 2019 sometime, if I'm right about that. And just wanted to remind folks that tool is available. And now that this is landed on our doorstep as a requirement in this coming in next year, it's time to maybe think about, could that tool help you out? It's kind of an initial screening tool. The sites that it helps you identify would need further site-specific work, but hopefully it helps you start with a large universe and narrow down to some favorable sites that are worth further follow-up with.
Thanks, Martin.
We didn't put Martin up to that, but Declan's actually going to talk about that tool later.
Yep.
Okay. Good.
Any other questions for Newt? I am not seeing anybody jumping up and down. All right, Newt, we might be able to let you off the hook.
Okay.
More questions? Thanks so much for coming.
No, thank you. Have a good rest of your meeting. Thanks
You
again.
too.